This is the second series looking at Christian marriage. Ephesians 5 verses 25 to 33. I'm simply looking at the role of the husbands. I'm going to look at specifically verse 25, verse 28, and verse 29. We looked at this in the first part of the message, but not in a lot of detail. And so I would like to look at that in a lot more detail in this section. So let's just read it as we go down 25 to 27. Husbands, love your wives just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her, to make her holy, cleansing her by the washing with water through the word, and to present her to himself as a radiant church, without stain or wrinkle or any other blemish, but holy and blameless. Here we see the ultimate model for the Christian is the love of Christ, and here the focus is on sacrificial love. Paul's first, just as, in verse 25, is just as Christ also loved the church. In other words, husbands are to love their wives in the same way Christ loved the church. That is, a love that is sacrificial. He gave himself for her. Verse 25, he loved the church and gave himself up for her, so that's a sacrificial love. Second thing, it's to be a sanctifying love, verse 26, to make her holy, cleansing her by the washing with water through the word. And then, of course, it's a selfless love because it's love that wasn't based on worldliness, but was based on grace. The church didn't deserve the love of Christ, but they are the ones who benefit from the love of Christ. Practical ways to live this out. As husbands, we have to put the needs of our wives above our own, even when it's costly. Prioritize time with her over hobbies or work. Financial decisions that benefit the family, not just personal comfort. Forgive quickly, just as Christ does, Colossians 3:13. And spiritually, the husbands are to lead the home, encouraging growth in faith without force or pride. Then, if we go on and read verse 28, in this same way, husbands ought to love their wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself. Here we see it's a unified love. If in the first example, Christ, it's a sacrificial love, here it's a unified love. Here Paul draws on the unity of marriage as one flesh, which he mentions later on in verse 31. And husbands are to love their wives as they love their own bodies. Practical ways to live this out are a husband must care for a wife's physical, emotional, and spiritual well-being as we would our own as husbands. Maybe we need to ask ourselves, would I speak to myself this way? Would I let myself be this exhausted or unsupported? Again, all practical suggestions, listen actively, not dismissively. Encourage rhythms of rest and nourishment for her and for marriage. Of course, Adam, going back to Genesis chapter 2, when he sees Eve, said, "This is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh." His recognition of unity reflects deep connection and care, and that should be true in the Christian marriage. And then the last, just as is in verse 29, after all, no one ever hated his own body, but he feeds and cares for it just as the Lord, just as Christ, so he does the church. Here we see the different aspect of love here is nourishing and cherishing. So we've got sacrificial love, we've got unified love, and we've got nourishing and cherishing love. As husbands, Christian husbands are to nourish and cherish their wives just as Christ does the church. These are nurturing, ongoing actions, not one-time grand gestures. And practical ways to live this out. Speak life into your wife, praise, encouragement, and affirmation. Protect her well-being emotionally and spiritually. Not to allow harshness or bitterness or neglect to settle in, Colossians 3 verse 19. Be attentive to her fears, dreams, and struggles, and cherish her inner world And of course, many examples, but the example picked out is Boaz and Ruth. Boaz protected and provided for Ruth, honoring her and ensuring her future. His actions reflect nourishing and cherishing love. And so the pattern that is left for us rather in Ephesians chapter 5 is first of all in verse 25 of a sacrificial love. Christ loved the church. A unifying love as your own bodies. In verse 28, love their wives as their own bodies, and then a nourishing and cherishing love as in verse 29. That is love through care and protection. This teaching lifts marriage, and Christian marriage specifically, beyond cultural norms into the realm of Christ-like devotion. Thank you for listening.